Fellas, we're going to be matchmaking every single fighter in the UFC roster in a completely random format using a random number generator, sticking them in a tournament to see who comes out on top. And we're going to be using a website called Ranking MMA, which essentially ranks every single fighter in every UFC weight class, whether they're in the top 15 or not. If they're signed to the UFC, they're going to be on this website. So every single active fighter in the UFC is going to be included in the random number generator. And we're going to be sticking them in a tournament format. For example, we'll start off with the 155-pound division at lightweight. If we look at every single fighter that's currently signed to the UFC lightweight division, and by the way, there's a lot of them. I think this is the most jam-packed division in the UFC. And we do a random number generator. We get the number 59. 59 in the lightweight division. We've got Chris Duncan, who just competed on the last week's card. He's going to be the first fighter in the tournament, followed up by number 18, which is going to be Ludovic Klein. First fight is Chris Duncan versus Ludovic Klein. 23, that's going to go to Drew Dober, who's going to be fighting this weekend. Followed up by 11, the 11th lightweight in the world, Michael Chandler. Followed up by 34, which is Mitabek Orobai. Followed up by 27, which is Drakkar Klose. Followed up by 70, Demir Hadzovic. Followed up by 81, so the worst fighter in the lightweight division is going to be in this tournament in Alex Reyes, the brother of Dominic Reyes. So here's our tournament, completely random matchmaking, using a random number generator, completing every fighter in the UFC, well, at least included every fighter in the lightweight division. Starting off with the first matchup, we got Chris Duncan versus Ludovic Klein. Actually quite a competitive fight. Chris Duncan just got a good win at UFC London last week, looked really good. A bit of a prospect now that he's moved to American top team. Ludovic Klein kind of goes under the radar in the lightweight division. I'm going to be picking Ludovic Klein to win this fight. I think he's a little bit more talented and well-rounded than Chris Duncan. Chris Duncan's definitely very green on the feet. He hasn't got the best striking, and he got submitted by Manuel Torres 2 fights ago, and the people that he's beaten are very lower-level UFC fighters. I'm picking Ludovic Klein, a guy who's, I think, on a huge winning streak in the UFC, might be undefeated in the lightweight division, to beat Chris Duncan and make it through the first part of the tournament. Followed by the next fight, Drew Dober versus Michael Chandler. This would be such a fucking banger because they've got a very similar style. They kind of look like they could be related, but they're both very hard-hitting, beatable, kind of explosive wrestlers, but they like to strike and they've got heavy hands. This would be an absolute banger if this was to ever happen. But I think Michael Chandler is the slightly more high-level version of Drew Dober. I know Chandler kind of gets mocked for not being able to pick up wins in the UFC, but you look at who he's losing to: Dustin Poirier, Charles Oliveira, Justin Gaethje, the best in the lightweight division. So I'm picking Michael Chandler to probably knock out Drew Dober at some point in the fight. Mitabek Orobai versus Drakkar Klose. Again, this could be a fight that could happen in the UFC because they're both kind of in a similar career spot. Mitabek Orobai is a very, very good wrestler. Just had a fight at the Year Contender 2024 against Rembetske. Drakkar Klose just got finished by Yoel Alvarez. They're both a couple of fights away from being ranked, but I'm going to go with Mitabek Orobai to win this one. Still a really good lightweight prospect despite taking one loss. Amazing wrestler. I think he'd counteract the wrestling of Drakkar Klose. I think on the feet, they're both just dogs. I'm picking Mitabek Orobai. And then we've got probably the lowest level fight, definitely the lowest level fight in the tournament. The worst fighter in the lightweight division, Dominic Reyes' brother, versus Demir Hadzovic, who just got chinned by Terence McKinney. I'm going to go with Demir Hadzovic. He's slightly more well-rounded than Alex Reyes. I don't know how Reyes is still in the UFC, but either way, that's the first part of the tournament done. The next matchup, Ludovic Klein versus Michael Chandler. Now, Ludovic Klein, I said this before, he's going under the radar in the lightweight division, but when you're going to a decision with Roosevelt Roberts, who is, again, someone that shouldn't really be in the UFC, I can't pick you over Michael Chandler. I know it's tricky picking Michael Chandler in the UFC, and if you're asking me to pick between Chandler and maybe like a Yoel Alvarez or Fares Ziam, I'm picking any other unranked fighter to beat Chandler, but Ludovic Klein, I think this is more winnable for Michael Chandler. It isn't like Ludovic Klein shines anywhere, so I think Chandler makes it to the final. Mitabek Orobai versus Hadzovic, it's going to be a complete mauling. Mitabek Orobai completely out-wrestles and probably submits Hadzovic in the very first round. So then we get Michael Chandler versus Mitabek Orobai. The future versus, I guess, the past in Michael Chandler. That guy's past his prime. Michael Chandler wins this one, but I will say Mitabek Orobai could pull it. Like, we know how dumb Michael Chandler is in the octagon. Knowing him, he's going to shoot a takedown on Mitabek Orobai, get caught in a guillotine and submitted. But I never thought I'd say this. Michael Chandler wins the tournament. Michael Chandler out of this tournament, because there's been some low-level fighters, I think he probably beats Mitabek Orobai, probably beats him on the feet. Definitely goes to a decision in my opinion, but I reckon he'd do the better on the feet. Kind of roughs him up in a similar way that Rembetske did. Michael Chandler wins the 155-pound tournament that's been randomly generated. And then if we do the same for the welterweight division, the first fighter on this list is going to be number 18 in the welterweight division, which is Rafael Dos Santos, a guy who kind of bounces between weight class, veteran in the UFC, and his first opponent is going to be number 9, Ian Gary. I mean, Ian Garry still goes to a decision regardless. But anyway, the next fighter, should I say, number 6, Colby Covington is going to be on this list. There's a good matchup arising if Ian Garry wins his next fight. Colby Covington is going to be taking on number 38, Themba Gorimbo, another fight that's kind of got history because these guys have kind of been beefing back and forth. They nearly ran into each other in the UFC PI. So the matchmaking is kind of good. Then we've got 44. Court McGee, probably past his sell-by date, is what it is. We needed a shit fighter in this list. Followed up by 25, Daniel Rodriguez, kind of doing his thing in the welterweight division. 56, Danny Barlow, just got knocked out by a jiu-jitsu practitioner. And 62, Jonathan Mikhailov, just got a good win at UFC 312. First matchup, Rafael dos Anjos versus Ian Garry. Rafael dos Anjos is a veteran. I think he does probably survive if it's a 3-rounder against Ian Garry because he's kind of got that veteran style. And Ian Garry isn't really a finishing guy. I'm going Ian Garry though. He definitely gets a unanimous decision over Rafael dos Anjos. Probably beats him in the same way that he beat Neil Magny. Pieces him up, gets a decision win, hurts him on the feet. Ian Garry gets this one done, makes it through to the first round. Themba Gorimbo versus Colby Covington. Again, like I said before, they've got a bit of beef going. Not beef necessarily, but they've definitely got a bit of, tenseness between them. But with that being said, Themba Gorimbo gets absolutely mauled by Colby Covington. Even though Colby Covington's past his prime, he's washed, whatever, his heart's not in the game, he still beats Themba Gorimbo. We just saw what Themba Gorimbo did when he stepped up to the plate and faced Vicente Luque. Covington probably unanimous decisions. Themba Gorimbo mauls him, out wrestles him, and just destroys him basically. Colby Covington makes it through the first round. Court McGee versus D-Rod. D-Rod outboxes Court McGee, goes without saying. And then Danny Barlow versus Jonathan Mikhailov. If you'd have asked me this a couple of months back, I probably would have said Danny Barlow, but after getting knocked out by Sam Patterson, I'm going Jonathan Mikhailov. He looked good in his last fight against Kevin Gisette. He's got grappling too that he showed in the Contender Series, so I think Jonathan Mikhailov makes it through the first round. So then we've got Ian Garry, Colby Covington, a fight that a lot of people wanted to see a couple of months ago. I guess probably a year ago from now. It's kind of past its sell-by date, but either way, this could have been a massive fight. Could have been one of the biggest rivalries in the UFC, in which Ian Garry would have beat the shit out of Colby Covington. I mean, let's be honest, we saw how Covington did against Buckley. Again, Ian Garry doesn't necessarily finish him. He definitely probably doesn't hurt him, but I reckon Ian Garry just pieces him up across 3 rounds, keeps it technical, avoids the grappling, keeps the fight standing, pieces up Colby Covington. But I would have loved to see this fight a couple of months back. Anyway, D-Rod versus Mikhailov. Mikhailov's definitely talented. I don't know if he's high-level talented though. We've only seen him beat Kevin Gisette. D-Rod's got fairly solid boxing. Definitely failed to become a top fighter, but I'm picking D-Rod to win a fairly close decision, but I reckon this would be a scrap. Very similar to Mikhailov's last fight. And then we've got the final, Ian Garry versus D-Rod. We've seen this fight before. Ian Garry knocked him out into next week. Ian Garry wins the welterweight tournament. Then we've got featherweight. Number 5, Diego Lopez, straight off the bat, one of the top featherweights in the world, could be a champion next month as the first fighter in this tournament. Then we've got 33, Sean Woodson. He's going to be fighting on the same card as Diego Lopez, bit of a prospect in this division. Then we've got 65, Roberto Romero, debuted against David Onama. Actually didn't look too bad against him. Very tough. One of the best chins. Well, definitely not one of the best chins, but solid chin. 19. Oh, Felipe Lima, another massive featherweight prospect. I think he should be getting a shot at the rankings. Then we've got 21. Another prospect, Mohamed Naimov, followed up by 31. Doo Ho Choi, another prospect. Doo Ho Choi looked great at UFC 310. Then we've got 15. Dan Ige. And then we've got 58. Francis Marshall, who just got robbed. This is a pretty fucking solid tournament. We've got a shit ton of featherweight prospects. First fight, Diego Lopez versus Sean Woodson. Sean Woodson could be tricky because of his range. Very lanky guy for the division, but either way, I'm picking Diego Lopez to beat him. Sean Woodson shouldn't have beaten Alex Caceres. Diego Lopez definitely implements the grappling, takes him down, and roughs him up on the feet. Goes without saying, Diego Lopez beats Woodson. Roberto Romero versus Felipe Lima. I think Romero probably makes it to a decision. He looked very good in his last fight against David Onaba, but with that being said, Felipe Lima is very good. Fast on the feet, former Octagon champion, very good grappling. I think he definitely beats Roberto Romero. Wherever the fight goes, Felipe Lima gets it past the first round. Then we've got Mohamed Naimov versus Doo Ho Choi. This would be a banger of a fight too. Doo Ho Choi looked insane against Landwehr. He went out there, his hands were so sharp and crisp. It looked like every single shot he was throwing was like a gunshot. And then he mixed it up with the grappling, got him in crucifix position. Doo Ho Choi is one of my favorite prospects to look out for. I hope he gets a fight booked. He beats Mohamed Naimov comfortably. Danny Ige versus Francis Marshall. Francis Marshall, I did think he got robbed against Myron Santos, but Danny Ige probably chins him and knocks him out cold. Danny Ige makes it through the first round. Then we've got Diego Lopez versus Felipe Lima. This would be such a good fight. I'm going to go go with Diego Lopez to win because we've seen a lot more from Lopez at the highest level. But if we do see this fight one day, this would be a banger because Felipe Lima looks really good in his last few fights. Good grappler, very similar to Diego Lopez in the sense that he's well-rounded and a very high-paced fighter. But Diego Lopez makes it into the final. Do Ho Choi versus Dan Ige. Another banger of the fight where I'm actually going to go Do Ho Choi to win. Dan Ige seems like you give Dan Ige an elite fighter and he just about falls short. He's good enough to make it into the top 15, but you give him somebody too complicated. I think Do Ho Choi, if the Do Ho Choi that showed up against Nate Landwehr shows up against Dan Ige, I think Do Ho Choi gets this one done. I think Do Ho Choi makes it into the finals, in which we're presented with a very good fight. I'm going to go with Diego Lopez, but Diego Lopez is a very scrappy fighter. He leaves himself open to getting caught. You don't really want to leave yourself open to getting caught when you're facing Do Ho Choi, who hits like an absolute truck. I'm going to go Diego Lopez to win. Probably implements the grappling and mixes it up and, gets the win via that, but either way, Diego Lopez is a tough matchup. So is Do Ho Choi. This would be another banger of a fight. I'm going Diego Lopez to win, but this has been a really interesting tournament in the featherweight division. A bunch of prospects. Even, like I said, Diego Lopez, Felipe Lima, and Do Ho Choi are fights that I'd want to see right now. But Diego Lopez, potentially a future champion, wins this tournament. Then we've got the heavyweight division. At number 9 in the heavyweight division, we've got Marcin Tybura. Heavyweight is definitely the least kind of compact division. Starting off with Tybura, 2-fight win streak, just beat Mick Parkin. Number 12, Shamil Gaziev, future champion. That's a good matchup. Then we've got number 6, Curtis Blades. Then we've got number 17, Jonata Denise, kickboxer, who's very one-dimensional. Number 8, Sergey Spivak. I'd love to fight him. Then we've got 15, Martin Badai, one of the most boring fighters on the roster. Followed up by 14, Kennedy Nezakuku, moved up to the heavyweight division, seems to be on a good run. Followed up by 20, Ryan Spann, might be one of the worst fighters on the roster right now. First fight, Marcin Tybura versus Shamil Gaziev. I would have said Tybura, but Tybura just keeps looking really shit in every fight. In his fight with Mick Parkin, he's facing the most unathletic heavyweight out there. His hands are down. He had the lowest output I've ever seen. His stamina sucked. I'm not been impressed by Marcin Tybura despite winning. Shamil Gaziev wins this one. Definitely got crisper hands than Marcin Tybura. I know the stamina of Shamil was bad, but it's only a 3-rounder. He probably outpoints Marcin Tybura, maybe even knocks him out on the feet because of his hands. And I think when it comes to grappling, if anybody's going to show offensive grappling, it's going to be Shamil Gaziev. Gaziev makes it through the first round. Then we've got Curtis Blades versus Denise. You've got one of the best wrestlers in the heavyweight division versus one of the worst grapplers in the heavyweight division. Curtis Blades takes him down and beats him via elbow, slashes him open, just the same way that Tybura did. Curtis Blades via TKO. Then we've got Spivak versus Spivak versus Badai. Two guys that love getting people in the clinch and roughing them up, but Sergey Spivak wins. He's probably got the better boxing than Martin Badai, definitely more athletic, probably got the better judo. He's just all around better than Martin Badai. Spivak makes it through. Kennedy Nezakuku versus Ryan Spann. Ryan Spann looked awful against Waldo Cortez Acosta. Kennedy Nezakuku seems to have a better career at heavyweight than he did at light heavyweight. He probably knocks out Ryan Spann, clips him on the feet, drops him, gets the finish. Nezakuku makes it into the first tournament. Then we've got Shamil Gaziev versus Curtis Blades. I could see Curtis Blades somehow flopping himself in this fight. He gets a big opportunity against Shamil Gaziev, finds a way to lose, but I'm not going to go against Blades. Blades beats Shamil Gaziev, takes him down, probably beats him with the ground and pound. And even on the feet, I think Curtis Blades is an underrated striker. Very long reach, nice 1-2, probably outpoint Shamil Gaziev, makes it rough for him. I'm going Blades to win this one by decision. Then we've got Spivak versus Nezakuku. I'm going to go Spivak to win this one. I could see Nezakuku giving him problems, but Spivak's a veteran of the heavyweight division. He's a bit of a win-loss fighter, and he just did take down Jelton Almeida and nearly finished Jelton Almeida in the first round. So I reckon because of the grappling, Spivak takes down Nezakuku, beats him with the grappling. And then we've got a fight that's actually kind of intriguing for the heavyweight division. Curtis Blades versus Sergey Spivak. I'd love to fight him. Two heavy grapplers, but Curtis Blades is just way better and more consistent than Sergey Spivak. He's a better striker. He hits harder. He's a better wrestler than Sergey Spivak. He's got more heart than Sergey Spivak. He's a more dangerous grappler than Spivak. Maybe not from a jiu-jitsu perspective. The only way Spivak wins this fight is if he pulls off a Hail Mary submission, which you ain't doing against Curtis Blades. Blades beats Sergey Spivak and wins the heavyweight tournament. The majority of the heavyweights were ranked on this list, which isn't a surprise considering that heavyweight is probably the most shallow division in the UFC. But either way, Curtis Blades wins the tournament, probably gets an interim title fight after this, and then loses an interim title fight because Curtis Blades can never win a big fight. That means a lot. So Blades wins the tournament. Then we've got middleweight. Number 8 in the middleweight division, Jared Cannonier. The Killer Gorilla is the first fighter on this list, followed by number 31, Gregory Rodriguez, which is a bit of an underwhelming pick. I mean, we just saw this fight, what, 2 months ago? We know exactly how that one went. Next fighter on the tournament, Jung Young Park. Doing his thing, just beat Brad Tavares, so bit of a prospect, I guess. Then we've got 26, Jacob Malkoun, goes under the radar in this division, followed up by 26, not 26, 22, shall I say, Joe Pyfer, going to be fighting this weekend, good middleweight prospect, followed up by 36, Dustin Stoltzfus, bit of a journeyman these days, but definitely hard-hitting. Then we've got 54, Marco Tulio, the Charles Oliveira of the middleweight division, followed up by 46, Aliaskhab Khizriev, one of the most not underrated, what's the word I'm looking for? One of the most anticipated guys in this division, undefeated, just disappeared from the face of the MMA, kind of like Zabit Magomedsharipov. Anyway, Cannonier Rodriguez, saw this fight a month ago. Cannonier faced adversity, got the finish. Cannonier beats Gabriel Rodriguez, saw the fight the first time. Then we've got Jung Young Park versus Jacob Malkoun. This is another very tough fight. Jacob Malkoun's going under the radar in the middleweight division, but I feel like Jung Young Park probably gets this one done. He's got hands as Jung Young Park, not an elite striker, but he has got hands. I reckon he out-wrestles Jacob Malkoun. It's a tough fight. It really is. I'm going Jung Young Park to win it, though. Followed up by Joe Pyfer versus Dustin Stoltzfus. No matter who wins this fight, if there's betting odds on this fight, I'm betting the house that there's a knockout because they're two very hard-hitting guys, but I feel like Joe Pyfer is just a lot better than Dustin Stoltzfus. Definitely a better striker from a technical perspective. Definitely a better grappler. Trades with Sean Brady, has underrated grappling. I think unless he gets clipped by a Hail Mary shot, which just ain't going to happen, let's be honest, he knocks out Dustin Stoltzfus, gets the KO. Joe Pyfer by KO. Then we've got Marco Tulio versus Khizriev. Now, this would actually be a super interesting fight. Marco Tulio, I think he's got one loss in his career. He's a really good prospect from Charles Oliveira's gym, Shooter Box. Just got a good finish against Ihor Potieria. Khizriev is so inactive, and he hasn't fought since early 2024, but he looks really talented. I'm going to go with Khizriev to win this one. Very good grappling, has hands on the feet, knows when to mix it up with the grappling. Unfortunately, I'm going to have to pick him to beat Marco Tulio. I like Tulio a lot, but I'm going Khizriev. One of my favorite, I can't even call him a prospect because I don't even know if he's competing anymore, but makes it through the first round. Cannonier versus Jung Young Park. Cannonier fucking brutalizes Jung Young Park. Let's just say it how it is. Joe Pyfer versus Khizriev. I want to go Khizriev, but we haven't seen Khizriev against a single, not even just elite, but a single talented guy in the middleweight division. I can't call him a prospect. At least with Joe Pyfer, we've seen him go the distance with Jack Hermansson, and apart from that, he's been slaughtering everybody. I've just seen a lot more from Joe Pyfer than I have with Khizriev. I think it's only fair that they go with Joe Pyfer to beat Khizriev in this fight. Don't know how he does it, most likely by decision. I'm going Joe Pyfer, though. And then we've got Jared Cannonier versus Joe Pyfer. Unless there's the odd chance that Joe Pyfer lands on Jared Cannonier and puts him out cold, if you're getting outstruck by the grappler in Jack Hermansson, Jared Cannonier is going to beat the living daylights out of you. Unless there's a new version of Joe Pyfer that we may see this weekend, Cannonier definitely butchers Joe Pyfer. 50-45 if it's a 5-rounder, 29-28 across the 3-rounder. Jared Cannonier beats Joe Pyfer and wins the middleweight tournament. Then we've got Flyweight. This is going to be interesting. There's so many flyweight prospects. 35 is going to be Daniel Perez, who just got the shit kicked out of him. 17, Joshua Van, one of the best prospects in this division. 11, Kai Asakura, big star, former rising champion, hasn't bought a win in the UFC. Then we've got 39, Stuart Nickel. Was a bit of a prospect coming into the UFC. Lost, I think it was UFC 3 or 5 when he lost, but still talented. Number 4, Amir Albazi in the division and this tournament. Then we've got number 1, Pantoja. I mean, this is fair, isn't it? The champion of the division, the guy who's beaten everybody at flyweight already, has somehow finessed himself into a tournament. Pantoja's in the tournament. Then we've got 28, Carlos Hernandez. Probably loses and then gets cut from the UFC, doing his thing. 26, Ray Saruya, just looked terrible against Joshua Van, but has got pretty decent grappling. Daniel Perez versus Joshua Van. Someone call the cops, this would be a murder on live television. Joshua Van would beat the living shit out of Daniel Perez. Daniel Perez was getting pieced up by Andre Lima and then taken down and out grappled. Joshua Van's the best and most crisp boxer in this division. Joshua Van would absolutely just tear apart Daniel Perez with the grappling. I think he gets, not with the grappling, with the striking. Probably gets a finish as well. I know Joshua Van's doesn't really tend to be a finisher, but because of how much of a mismatch this would be, Joshua Van would pick apart and knock out Daniel Perez. Easy win for Joshua Van. Kai Asakura versus Stuart Nickel. Unless Kai Asakura is a complete fraud, he probably knocks out Stuart Nickel. Looks huge for the division. Quick, dangerous striker. Fell short against the best, but either way, Kai Asakura is going to knock out Stuart Nickel. Amir Albazi versus Pantoja. Amir Albazi probably would have beaten anybody on this list had his opponent not been the best in the world. Yeah, Amir Albazi, bit of a fraud. Pantoja, another name to his resume. beat Samir Albazi. Carlos Hernandez versus Rey Saruya. We saw this fight before at UFC 303. Rey Saruya beat him by out-grappling him. Rey Saruya beats Carlos Hernandez again. And then we've got Joshua Van versus Kaya Sakura. Asian community, stand up. This will be a banger. Who am I picking? See, I don't know, because I feel like Joshua Van has proven himself to be a lot more UFC worthy than Kaya Sakura. He hasn't got a single win in the UFC, but he has beaten Manel Cap. I'm going to have to go with Kaya Sakura to win this one. I know there's going to be a lot of upset Joshua Van fans for the... or whatever, however you say it. There's going to be a lot of upset fans of Joshua Van in this situation. I don't blame you. But Kaya Sakura, dangerous tall guy for the division, and even though he hasn't really got a win in the UFC, he has beat Manel Cap and he has looked crisp outside of the UFC, and it isn't like there's going to be any grappling threat from Joshua Van in this fight, which seems to be the biggest kryptonite of Kaya Sakura. I'm picking him to beat Joshua Van by a close decision. Pantoja versus Rey Saruya, again, one-sided beatdown from Alejandro Pantoja, which brings us to a fight that we've just seen a month ago where Pantoja scrambled him like an egg. Pantoja beats Kaya Sakura again, and surprise, surprise, Pantoja wins the Flyweight tournament. Then we've got the Bantamweight division, one of the most competitive in the UFC, 33, Adrian Yanez, former prospect, but still a fun fighter, very good offensive boxer, defensively not so much, 70. We've got Su Young Yu. Probably shouldn't be 70, to be fair. I reckon he should be higher. Just got a win recently on the most recent Apex card. Going to be taking on Adrian Yanez. Then we've got 62. Archie Long lost to Raul Rosas Jr. on the feet. That's a bad look. Then we've got 44. Cody Gibson. I used to think he was terrible, but even though he's losing on a consistent basis, he's making some of these losses competitive, like he did in his last fight against Damon Blackshear against Brad Katona. 13. Vinicius Oliveira, the best unranked guy in the Bantamweight division. Honestly, I thought this guy was a fighting nerd at one point before obviously the whole Fighting Nerds team blew up, because he fights so similar to a fighting nerd. This kind of personality, infectious personality, dangerous elite striker, crazy personality. I'm going off the topic, but Vinicius Oliveira is a fucking G. 42. Brad Katona came from the Ultimate Fighter, isn't the highest level fighter. Then we've got 28. Charles Jourdain moved down to the Bantamweight division, has looked really good, but either way, still fairly untested. And then we've got number 60. Christian Quinones. Know absolutely nothing about this guy. Start off with the first fight, Adrian Yanez versus Su Young Yu. Su Young Yu's a good grappler. He has got decent striking, but Adrian Yanez probably gets the knockout. Adrian Yanez is kind of like all his eggs are in offensive boxing. He's probably one of the best offensive boxers in the Bantamweight division, but you hit him with anything back, he's getting chinned. He's got no defense, but I don't think Su Young Yu's going to be the guy to crack the chin or even land on Adrian Yanez. Adrian Yanez probably outboxes and gets a late finish against Su Young Yu. Archie Long versus Cody Gibson. I'm going to go with Cody Gibson to win this one. I said this before, Cody Gibson, even though he's not high level, he was looking good in that first minute against Damon Blackshear. Very high pace, very good technical boxing, decent grappling as well, just not high level. And if you're getting outstruck by Raul Rosas Jr., I think Cody Gibson probably outstrikes you too. I'm picking Gibson to win this one. Then we've got Vinicius Oliveira versus Brad Katona. Brad Katona is very hittable. Vinicius Oliveira is one of the best strikers in this division, at least a top 10 striker in the Bantamweight division in my opinion. Picks apart Brad Katona. Probably doesn't get it finished because Brad Katona's got a good chin, but I'm still picking Oliveira to pick apart Brad Katona. Charles Jourdain versus Christian Quinones. Jourdain looked really good in his last fight against Victor Henry. I think he does the same and performs well against Quinones. Charles Jourdain gets this one done. Adrian Yanez versus Cody Gibson. Now, I did say that Adrian Yanez struggles defensively, and we know how offensively heavy Cody Gibson is, so maybe he clips AJ. It's just not happening. Adrian Yanez knocks him out. What am I on about? Then we've got Vinicius Oliveira versus Charles Jourdain. This would be a super competitive fight, but it seems like every single time we put Charles Jourdain against an elite fighter, not even just elite, but a talented fighter, he loses. Vinicius Oliveira, who should be ranked, would absolutely pick apart Charles Jourdain, in my opinion. Maybe even gets to finish the same way that Gene Silva did. I know he isn't necessarily as hard hitting as Gene Silva, but definitely picks apart Charles Jourdain, gets to win on the feet. Vinicius Oliveira makes it. And then we've got Adrian Yanez versus Vinicius Oliveira. This would be an absolute banger, but Adrian Yanez defensively sucks. Vinicius Oliveira, much better striker than Adrian Yanez, taking everything into account. It would just be, in my opinion, Vinicius Oliveira outlanding, outstriking, picking apart Adrian Yanez, having the bigger moments. I don't even think he'd let Adrian Yanez land anything because of how good his range control is. We just saw how good his range was against Said Nurmagomedov when he had to worry about the grappling too. So I'm picking Vinicius Oliveira to beat Adrian Yanez. And even though there's a tournament without a single ranked bantamweight, I think Vinicius Oliveira wins the bantamweight tournament. And definitely beats Adrian Yanez. And then we've got the light heavyweight division. Again, quite a shallow division is the light heavyweight division. The first fighter we've got is number 21, Marcin Prachnio, journeyman. Next up, we've got number 13, Alexander Rakic. You know what? Even though he's top 5 in the UFC light heavyweight division, he probably should be 13. His best win's Anthony Smith, but either way, in the rankings at least. Then we've got 26, Ibo Aslan, one of the biggest stars in Turkey, but just got fraud checked by Ian Cutelaba, is what it is. Then we've got number 14, Anthony Smith. Oh, where do I even start with Anthony Smith? A veteran, but not one of these Jim Miller type veterans where he's still going. I feel like Anthony Smith has completely quit, or at least he quits every time he's in the octagon, but maybe he can fraud check somebody like he did with Vitor Petrino. 28, Bruno Lopez, underrated was the word I'm looking for, in the light heavyweight division. Just got a good win over Magomed Gadzhizulov and has like a 90% finishing rate. 27, Brenton Ribeiro, another very talented guy, just shut down the prospect of Dio Nurgajai. Look out for Brenton Ribeiro. Then we've got number 4 in the division, Carlos Ulberg. Just got a controversial win over Jan Blachowicz. Probably a win away from a title shot. Definitely one of the top 3 best, or top 4 best light heavyweights in the world. And then we've got number 31. Where's the 31? Ivan Erslan. Lost his UFC debut to Ian Cutelaba, is what it is. First fight, Marcin Prachnio versus Rakic. Rakic completely Rakic destroys him. Rakic outpoints. No, not even outpoints. He probably gets a finish. I know Rakic isn't really a finisher. He's got very low output, but Marcin Prachnio's a low-level guy. Got outstruck by, what's his name, Modestas Bukauskas. Alexander Rakic completely picks apart Marcin Prachnio. Probably gets a late finish by TKO. Rakic beats Prachnio. Then we've got Ibo Aslan versus Anthony Smith. I'm going Anthony Smith to win this one. Listen, I know that Ibo Aslan's got heavy hands, but I see this going similar to Petrino, where if Anthony Smith isn't as mentally dejected as he was against Dominic Reyes, where he just lets the opponent win, I think Smith could win this one with the grappling. If he implements the grappling against Ibo Aslan, Aslan's grappling sucks. Smith probably takes him down and gets a decision win, maybe submits him like he did with Ryan Spann and Vitor Petrino. I'm going Smith, the veteran, to beat Ibo Aslan. Then we've got Carlos. No, we haven't got Carlos. Then we've got Bruno Lopez versus Brenton Ribeiro. We've seen this fight before in the Contender Series. Brenton Ribeiro knocked him out. So I've got to go with Brenton Ribeiro to beat Bruno Lopez again. Carlos Ulberg versus Ivan Erslan. Ulberg gets a first-round KO. Then we've got Alexander Rakic versus Anthony Smith. Now, if you ask me this nowadays, 100% I'm going Alexander Rakic to win. And even 5 years ago, when Smith wasn't as washed, Alexander Rakic was able to beat him, so I'm picking Rakic to beat Smith. Then we've got Brenton Ribeiro versus Carlos Ulberg. Now, Ribeiro's hard-hitting, and he's kind of impressed me in these last couple of performances as Ribeiro, but I'm going to go Carlos Ulberg to win this one. Picks apart Brenton Ribeiro. Hopefully, he isn't as scared as he was against Jan Blachowicz, where he's just on the back foot with leg kicks constantly because of the danger of Ribeiro. But either way, I still think Carlos Ulberg wins this fight. And then the next fight in the final, or the final of this tournament, Rakic versus Ulberg. Yeah, Ulberg wins this one. Rakic is just too low output in my opinion. Even though he's a technical striker, I think Ulberg's definitely the better striker out of the two of them. Showed that against Jan Blachowicz. I don't think he has to worry about the danger too much against Rakic as well, so I think we'd see a lot more offense from Carlos Ulberg in this fight than we have in his past couple of fights, because there isn't really much danger from Rakic. I'm going Carlos Ulberg to defeat Alexander Rakic and win the final of the light heavyweight division. Now we're going to do the champion segment, where we're going to be matchmaking champions against completely random champions of their weight class lineage. So, for example, if we start off with Pantoja, we've got the second most recent flyweight champion against Pantoja, which is going to be Davison Figueiredo as the second most recent champion. Who wins between Pantoja and Figueiredo? Listen, Pantoja might be the best flyweight, or not even might be, he's definitely the best flyweight of this modern era. But with that being said, Davison Figueiredo beats Pantoja. I think Prime Figueiredo is so underrated in this division. He's very, very talented. Powerful, one of the hardest hitting flyweights we've ever seen. Got pop on his feet, grappling's elite, amazing jiu-jitsu. I reckon he chins Pantoja. I know they've fought before and Figueiredo was able to beat him, so that's partially why I'm picking him to win again, but even if they hadn't fought, Figueiredo beats Pantoja. This is quite possibly the worst fight. I think if Davison and Figueiredo never moved up to bantamweight, he would eventually beat Pantoja and probably be the current flyweight champion of the world. Figgy beats Pantoja. Merab against the 8th most recent bantamweight in the world, which is going to be Renan Barão. Renan Barão was good, kind of underrated, had a bit of a fall off, but he gets demolished by Merab. I think Merab is the most skilled bantamweight we've ever seen in UFC history. This division moves so fast. Merab, being how dominant he is nowadays, definitely does what he does to everybody and out-grapples and mauls Renan Barão. Yeah, Merab wins this one. Ilia Topuria or Ilia Apturo versus the second most recent champion, which is Max Holloway. We saw this fight a couple of months ago. You can make an argument to say that the Holloway that fought Topuria wasn't prime Holloway, but I mean, if Holloway coming off a fifth round knockout over Justin Gaethje and previous to that being on a 2-fight win streak isn't prime Holloway, I don't know what is. Topuria, seen the fight before, knocks out Max Holloway. Then we've got Islam Makhachev against the 10th most recent lightweight champion. In other words, the first ever lightweight champion in Jens Pulver. It doesn't really need explaining. Makhachev could probably beat him with his hands tied behind his back, to be fair. Jens Pulver, first champion in lightweight history. It is what it is. Got a good legacy for that reason. But either way, I mean, this is as fair as Makhachev going into the street and beating some random dude on the crosswalk. Makhachev destroys him, finishes him however he wants. Bilal Muhammad versus the 11th most recent champion, which is Pat Miletich. I honestly think Pat Miletich could take it to a decision with Bilal Muhammad. Bilal Muhammad definitely wins by dominant decision, but I reckon Pat Miletich probably takes it to a decision. I'm going Bilal Muhammad to beat Pat Miletich. It goes without saying, but still probably makes it to a decision. Dricus du Plessis versus the 5th most recent middleweight champion, which is GSP. Now, it is important to note that we're not talking about prime GSP. We're talking about the GSP that fought Bisping and kind of knew that he probably couldn't keep up with the Romeros and the Whitakers. Listen, I'm sorry. I can't pick Dricus du Plessis to beat GSP. I know Dricus du Plessis is shaping himself up to be one of the best middleweights of this modern generation along with Adesanya. I ain't picking him to beat GSP. GSP is just too well-rounded, and I don't need to explain GSP to everybody. Everybody knows who GSP is. I'm going GSP to probably get the win over Dricus du Plessis. As good as Dricus du Plessis is, and he finds a way to win because of plot armor, so does GSP. And I feel like Dricus just leaves himself with too many openings to get submitted or knocked out. GSP probably finds a way to win. Magomed Ankalaev against the 8th most recent light heavyweight champion, which is Mauricio Hua. Hua was a complete savage back in the day. Magomed Ankalaev beats him nowadays, though. The division has moved on in terms of talent. Even though Mauricio Hua was going out there and demolishing guys, none of those guys were anywhere close to the guys that Ankalaev's beating. Ankalaev definitely beats Hua by decision. Tom Aspinall against the 14th most recent heavyweight champion, which is Josh Barnett. I mean, this is a complete barn murder. I wonder who wins this fight. By the skin of our teeth, Tom Aspinall wins. Anyway, that is me matchmaking randomly every single fighter on the UFC roster. A little bit of your thoughts on this video. If it was a bit of a more, unique video idea, if you want to see more stuff like this, just let me know your thoughts. Thank you for watching.